Next topic is the eye's internal anatomy. So what we're looking here is the sagittal section of the eyeball. So the eyeball itself is a round sphere, and it's made out of the tissue called, where is it, sclera. It's this white, thick connective tissue that makes up the shape of the eyeball. And in the front, sclera becomes transparent, and this is where it's called the cornea. So this is the part of the eye that covers the iris and the pupil like a dome-shaped structure. Behind cornea, there's space. And the space is called the anterior chamber. This space is filled with a liquid called aqueous humor, and this space provides sort of like an additional lens in addition to the cornea to help focus the light in the back of the retina. The retina is this yellow tissue in the back of the eyeball chamber, and we'll get to it in a minute. So next structure is the iris. Iris is the muscle. It's a circular muscle. It's a smooth muscle that regulates the size of the opening called pupil. And the opening pupil allows the light to enter the eyeball and focus on the retina, actually in this little spot, like a little kind of like notch in the retina. It's called macula. It's the point of the sharpest focus. And behind the pupil, there's going to be another structure. Before the light gets to the retina, it actually passes through plenty of structures. First, it passes through the cornea, then through the aqueous humor, pupil as a whole. Then it passes through the lens. The lens is a gumball-shaped structure. It's actually clear, not this like whitish cloudy color. It's clear, and the lens is flexible. Here's the lens. It is connected to a muscle called ciliary body. The ciliary body is also a circular muscle like the iris, but imagine that ciliary body and the lens have kind of like the same configuration as the iris and the pupil, except like the lens will be like positioned where the pupil is, but here. And a ciliary body would look kind of like the iris, but inside of the eye, behind the iris. Ciliary body is a smooth muscle that regulates the shape of the lens. It can actually pull on the lens and make it a little bit flatter, or relax and make it a little bit thicker, and that actually helps us to adjust the near point accommodation. So basically the ability to focus on the nearby and far away objects selectively. I believe I have a picture of how that works. Nope, don't have that here. Let's find near point accommodation, and to show you how that works with a lens. Here we go. This is a pretty decent diagram right here. So the lens can become more extended and flatter this way, so it's thinner this way, as opposed to more round and thicker shape. So when the lens is stretched thin, this is when we are able to focus on a far away object better, and when the lens is relaxed and thickened, we can focus on the near objects a little bit better. And as we get older, we actually lose the ability to focus on the nearby objects slowly. About like a onset of that happens at about 50 years of age, and that is because the lens sort of like loses the flexibility, and the people become unable to focus on the close objects as well. So you gotta hold something a little bit further away from your eyes to focus on it. So back to this picture. Next, behind the lens, there's going to be a big chamber inside of the eyeball. It's going to be filled with liquid that is more gelatinous rather than fluid in consistency. This liquid is called the vitreous humor or vitreous body. So either vitreous humor or vitreous body. It fills up this chamber inside of the eyeball. It's called the posterior chamber or vitreous chamber, as opposed to anterior chamber in front of the iris, and then the posterior chamber, the larger one, behind the iris. So the lens is technically located in the posterior chamber. So the vitreous humor, vitreous body, it keeps the eyeball full. It maintains its shape by creating pressure inside of the eyeball, and actually helps to keep the retina connected to the back of the eyeball, because retina itself is a neural tissue. It's highlighted here in yellow, and it's made out of lots of photoreceptors and neurons, and it doesn't have any kind of connective tissue. Basically, it doesn't have any kind of glue that holds it to the back of the eyeball. It is pressed against the eyeball by the vitreous body. So if the vitreous body is disrupted, that could actually disengage the retina from the back of the eyeball, so it can actually fall off from the back of the eyeball. So the vitreous humor is this gelatinous liquid inside of the eyeball. Now, posterior to the vitreous humor, we're going to find retina, and retina is possibly the most important structure in the eye. Retina contains photoreceptors that we're going to talk about shortly. Photoreceptors are those receptors that allow us to detect light, whether it's darkness or whether it's brightness, or its colors. And retina is connected to the brain by this really thick nerve called the optic nerve. It's located in the back of the eyeball. It's not positioned directly in the center of the eyeball, so if you drew like a straight line through the middle of the cornea, iris, lens, you're actually going to end up right here in this spot. It's called the macula. So macula is the spot of the sharpest vision. It's the most dense in photoreceptors area of the retina, but the optic nerve is going to be located a little bit more inferior to the macula, and if you look at the front of the eye, it's going to be a little bit more medial, so towards the nose, the optic nerve. I'll show you a picture shortly. So the optic nerve connects each eyeball's retina to the brain, to the occipital lobe of the brain, cerebral hemispheres. The optic nerve also has blood vessels that travel together with this optic nerve. So as the optic nerve connects to the eyeball structure, so do the blood vessels. These blood vessels are arteries and veins, of course, and they carry arteries, the red ones carry blood to the eye structures, especially to the retina, because these hungry for glucose photoreceptors are neural cells that need lots of ATP to produce the vision for us, produce the images. They are excited, these photoreceptors are excited by the light, and they need to produce an electrical action potential to send to the brain as the light excites them, so that the brain can receive the information from the eye. So these photoreceptors need lots of energy. They need lots of oxygen that's supplied by these blood vessels, and of course nutrients, and veins carry those waste products, including carbon dioxide, back into the systemic circulation. The area on the retina right here where the eye blood vessels and the nerve enter the eyeball is actually the blind spot. It doesn't contain any photoreceptors. This spot is called the optic disc, and you can actually see it really well in this picture. So what are we looking here? This is an actual real photograph of the eye as taken by an eye doctor, the ophthalmologist, through the pupil actually. So the doctor is able to look through the pupil using direct light to shine into the eyes. If you've ever been to the eye doctor, you're familiar with the procedure. The bright light enters the pupil and illuminates the chamber of the eyeball, producing this kind of picture. So what we're looking here is the retina and its blood vessels. So you can see the blood vessels all originate from one spot, and this is where they enter the eyeball. This is the optic disc. So this is where the optic nerve and the blood vessels, so this is going to be the thickness of the optic nerve that enters the eyeball, and these blood vessels radiate from one spot and spread around the retina, nourishing it. So what the doctors do, actually, the reason why they look inside of the eyeball is to check for the health of these blood vessels. If there's some kind of diseases of these blood vessels, that means the retina might not be receiving enough nutrients and oxygen, and that could actually damage the photoreceptors if they're not getting a proper blood supply, and that could not only decrease the vision, it could actually completely not only reduce the sense of vision, but it can actually totally make a person blind if the blood vessels are damaged. And the blood vessels could be damaged by high blood pressure. So this is one more reason why high blood pressure is a dangerous condition to have in a body, not just for the health of the heart and brain, but also for the health of the eyes and other structures in the body. And right here in the center, you can see there's like a darker area containing an even darker area in the center. This is the macula. This is this area called macula. It's actually called macula densa and the fovea centralis. So this is the area that contains the most photoreceptors. This is where we have the sharpest vision. So we can kind of see things in other parts of the retina. They're just not as clear. So if the light doesn't focus right here, right on this macula, then we don't have a sharp vision. The vision looks blurry. So these are the structures of the retina. The optic nerve, the optic disc, the area where the blood vessels and the nerve neurons enter the eyeball, the retinal blood vessels, all of these blood vessels, macula, the area of the sharpest vision. Now, deep to or posterior to the retina, there's a tissue highlighted here in red. This tissue is called choroid, and in the real eye, it's actually black. It's a jet black tissue, and what it does, it helps to absorb the light inside of the eyeball, making that chamber very dark, so that when the light enters the eyeballs and focuses on the macula, it doesn't kind of like refract and creates aberrations in the eye. So choroid, this is going to be the last tissue before we get to the sclera. And finally, in this picture that I haven't showed you yet or pointed it out but mentioned it earlier, the conjunctiva, it's this not connective tissue, it's this mucous membrane that covers the eye. And it's going to be continuous with the eyelids. As you can see, it's going to be transitioning to the eyelids here.